Okay, I wanted to make a video going through row operations in a stated order. And this is a typical homework problem you'll see when you're trying to get used to augmented matrices. So the first thing I would recommend you do is recognize why this might be important. You have an augmented matrix 3 by 4, which could be representing a system of equations, where the first equation was 1x plus 3y plus 2z equals 5, 6y minus 4z equals 16, and 1y plus 3z equals -1. And so typically, if you were using matrices to solve that system, you would set up the augmented matrix like so, and then you would try to rewrite it in what we call row echelon form, where you have ones on the diagonal and zeros below. So if you were trying to get this term here to be a 1, since you already have the 1 and the 0 here, one thing you could do is swap rows 2 and 3, because swapping rows 2 and 3 would get that 1 where we would like it to be, because you always start with row 1, then you go down here to get the 0, then the 1, then the 0, then the 0, then the 1. That's the process. So if you're trying to get a 1 here and you notice there's a 1 already right below it or right above it, that might be a swap that's helpful. So that's what this symbol here means. The double arrow means row swap. So let's go ahead and do that row operation first, our row swap. And one of the things I recommend when you're doing row operations is copy and paste the rows which are not being changed. So since rows 2 and 3 are changing, row 1 is not. So I'm going to rewrite row 1 as 1, 3, 2, 5, and I'll write that little line for consistency. But the new row 2 will be the old row 3. That's what a row swap does. So 0, 1, 3, -1. And the row 3 will be the old row 2, 0, 6, -4, 16. Okay, so we've already done our first row operation now. To get our next row operation, what we need to do is recognize what it's asking us. It is asking us to take -6 times row 2 and add it to row 3, putting the result in row 3. That's what this single arrow means. Put this result in this new row. So the only row that really should end up changing when you do the second row operation would be row 3. Rows 1 and 2 should stay the same. So I can copy rows 1 and 2. Really? I thought I was changing row 2. Not in the end. That's just an intermediate step, a row operation. So I'm going to copy rows 1 and 2 first. 1, 3, 2, 5, 0, 1, 3, -1. Okay. Now, if you're curious as to why they chose this particular transformation, row operation I should say, it's because they're trying to get what we call row echelon form. And in order to do that, you want ones in the diagonal and zeros below. So you notice you have the 1 here, the 0, the 1, that's good. You have the 0 here, and if you were doing this yourself, the next thing would be to get this 6 to turn in to a 0. And then after that to turn this -4 into a 1. So since you're trying to do that, you would say, well, the number above it is a +1. What would I need to multiply it by so that when I add these two rows together, this turns into a 0? The answer would be you'd like to multiply row 2 by -6. So that's why we're multiplying row 2 by -6 and adding it to row 3. So let's do that here. If you take row 2 and multiply it by a -6 and add that to row 3 and put the result in row 3, let's see what we get. So -6 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. So that's good. That remained what we wanted, a 0 there. -6 times 1 is -6. Adding -6 to +6 is 0. That's what we wanted for row echelon form. And next up, 3 times -6 is -18. Adding that to a -4 is -22. Okay, so you think that's not great, but your next step in this problem, if you were solving the whole system that's represented here, you would want to turn this into a 1 by multiplying the whole row by -1/22, the reciprocal. But we're not done yet. We need this last entry. So we take -6 times -1, which is 6, and add 6 to 16, which is 22. Okay, now that's technically all they've asked you to do. This is the answer for this problem. But where this would continue, if you were continuing the problem, you would take -1/22 times row 3, and that would put the result in row 3. That would mean that this would become a 0 still, because 0 times anything is 0. This would still be a 0. But -22 times -1/22 would be a 1, and 22 times -1/22 would be a -1, and you'd end up with z equals -1, and then you could back substitute and multiply 3 times that number and get your y, and then you could back substitute to get your x. So you could keep going if you were trying to solve the entire system of equations that's represented here. But all they were asking you to do is practice what this meant. Row swap, perform the row operation, and replace row 3 with that operation. Well, I hope that was helpful, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me by email or phone. Otherwise, I will see you next time, and remember, practice, because math is not a spectator sport.